la la, ya la la la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la. Ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la ya la la la, ya la la la.
There's a Jewish value, Lador Vador, which Danny just played for us. It means from generation to generation. It's about making connections between generations. Whether we tell stories, pass on recipes, play catch, share photos, or just spend time together, Lador Vador creates a narrative of generational succession that spans our lives, from failure to success, from sadness to joy. Today our focus is on the legacy of two people who left an indelible imprint on their family and their community. Martha and Marvin brought light into their world. They also added light to the world with the lives they created. And here we are, multiple generations who share their DNA, who can continue their efforts by also bringing light into a world littered with darkness. They were engaged with youth, they were engaged with life, and they would want us to carry on their light and strive to make the world a better place. Individually and as a couple, they experienced plenty of tragedy, but they moved beyond their losses to embrace life, to love, and to give back. We owe it to their legacy to learn from their example. Which brings us to these two plaques. For nearly 60 years, these two signs greeted those who entered Temple B'nai Emet, the synagogue where Sandy, Neal, and I grew up. In a moment, the grandchildren will read from our parents' community and will learn why these plaques came to be. Recently, the temple was torn down and the congregation relocated. But thankfully, Neal rescued the plaques from the wrecking ball. If not for his forethought, generosity, and effort, they would have disappeared without continuing to fulfill their original mission, to create a safe space for Jewish youth to congregate, to sing, to laugh, dance, and find their identities. But why Camp Newman? A place they never knew. Camp Newman is a haven of vibrancy, spirituality, fun, and Jewish identity. It's why Joe and I have made a long-term charitable commitment to Camp Newman. We can think of no better place to continue the mission of these plaques, to honor, as a family, the best of who Marvin and Martha were. Camp Newman has been part of our collective family for decades. Jory and Lee met at Camp Swig, the predecessor to Camp Newman. Danny solidified his deeply held Jewish identity as a camper, as a counselor, and went on to be the camp's head songwriter. Mike attended Camp Newman for a summer. Joanne served on and was president of the board of directors, and Ari has spent countless summers growing on this very land. Hopefully, future generations of our family will have the opportunity to fall in love with this place. Imagine taking your children or grandchildren to this spot one day and telling them that these plaques honor their great or great-great-grandparents. In 2017, Camp Newman also experienced tragedy when the horrendous Tubbs fire covered more than 36,000 acres and destroyed more than 5,600 structures. 81 of the 90 buildings on this property alone were leveled. But like the phoenix, the immortal bird of Greek mythology, both Camp and the Greene family have survived and thrived, arising from the ashes even stronger. So, 60 years after their untimely departure, in the presence of their children, their grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, on July 17, 2022, which would have been the weekend of Marvin's 98th birthday, in a sacred place where young people can embrace their identity for the sake of the children and generations to follow, Marvin and Martha Greene are honored for it. Adam?
For the sake of the children, the parents are honored. A living tribute to Marvin and Martha Greene. This significant and fitting inscription may be found above the double-carved doors leading to the Greene Teenage Lounge.
This beautiful new addition to our temple is especially meaningful because it is tangible, functional, and living tribute to a most revered young couple. Marvin and Martha Greene so lived their abbreviated lives as to inspire their family, friends, and community to emerge from the shock and grief of their tragic loss, determined to perpetuate the Greenes' deep interest in and for young people and their activities.
Actually, Marvin and Martha Greene themselves must be credited as the architects of the Greene Teenage Lounge. As parents and as leaders of B'nai B'rith youth groups, they pointed out the need for such a project. By their deeds and example, they drew the preliminary blueprints, and from these blueprints, friends, too numerous to list individually, and family began to lay the foundation for this project. The rabbi designated the Greene Teenage Lounge as his special project for 1963, and close friend Maury Behar made the initial appeal to which the community generously responded.
The selfless and devoted efforts of Ann and Dave Gladman, Bubby and Pa, were especially note that memorable home-cooked dinner. The elegant dinner dance hosted at the Glen Air Country Club by Paul and Ruth, Joe and Yetta, Nat and Rose Greene, and Jack and Rose Matisoff.
The overall design and plan for the Greene Teenage Lounge was lovingly and tastefully executed by another very special couple, Paul and Ruth Greene, and a group of men personally and completely committed to this project.
And that brings us full circle. For the sake of the children, all children, and most especially Sandy, Neal, and Fred Greene, we honor these parents by perpetuating their interests and transforming their dreams into reality.
Hevenu Shalom Alechem, the first three words that anyone, no matter who they are, hear when they show up to camp for the summer. From staff to campers, these words followed by "we are so glad to see you" set the tone and message for what this place is all about. Hevenu Shalom Alechem translates to "we come to greet you in peace," and these words are met with claps and cheers for anyone who enters these gates. Ever since my first summer here back in 2012, my mom would embarrass me and always roll down the windows and clap with all those CITs and sing Hevenu Shalom just as loud. As a little 8-year-old, this was the most embarrassing thing in the world to me, but as I've gotten older and she has continued to do this, I've begun to understand why this brings her so much joy. To her, this song and tradition reminds her of her time at camp as a kid, just as it now reminds me of mine. This place is so full of traditions and memories that are so ingrained in people that they really last a lifetime. On a usual non-intercession day, you're able to sit anywhere on camp and hear the constant talking and laughter of hundreds of kids. It's the sound of cannonballs splashing in the pool, or cheers on the field when someone wins their Frisbee game. There is something so special about a place that allows Jewish kids to experience happiness, love, support, acceptance, and more in their 2 to 8 weeks here. And for me and so many others, camp has done just that. Up until this year, I've been going to camp for 10 summers, and it really was my home away from home. Even though I'm not here this summer, in many ways it still is my home. It's the place where one summer I'd eat 6 apples a day because the food was just so bad. Or where I would push myself out of my comfort zone and try something new. Or where I saw the most Disney-like shooting star in the world. It's where I won my first CIT staff Frisbee game on this very field. And it's where I got to come back as regional NIFTY president and lead an event with over 200 teams. It's why I have tiles and tree trunks of this place hung up in my room. This place is very special. On the day of the Tubbs fire in October 2017, our beloved Camp Newman burned to ashes. Between the crying and grieving, everyone had the hope and belief that camp would still take place the following summer, and that soon one day we would be able to return to the home that is so special to so many people. Everyone struggled and grieved in different ways with what felt like a major loss. We lost something that felt safe, something that allowed us to make memories in a place that felt like home. But over the last 5 years, we have all grown and rebuilt ourselves literally and figuratively to return to our normal and comfort. And though it looks different than it was, and it feels like there are some things missing, the fact that we are still here and thriving is all that matters. I feel proud to be part of a family that has grown and thrived similarly to camp after a travesty. There really is no better place to honor what remains, not what was lost. I also feel honored to be part of the third generation in this family to have grown up and been a part of many different Jewish communities and outlets that have allowed for comfort, healing, love, and growth. Having our family stories shared and honored in this place today is a memory that I look forward to keeping with me for a very long time. And while I don't know the next time I'll be at camp, I'm glad to know that the last time was with my family, who I love so much and I'm so glad to have in my life.
When we live Jewish values and culture, study Jewish history, and create legacies, we honor them.
Neal? When we are of service to our country and our community,
We honor them.
when we mentor young people,
We honor them.
When
we capture, preserve, and share memories,
we honor them.
When we create and support the arts, when we engage in competition, and when we challenge our entrepreneurial spirit,
we honor them. When we value and celebrate family, we honor them.
Yikadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yamad, Yibrach, Yuteg, Yamlit, Mahuteg, B'chayachon, Yomechon, B'chayet, B'chayet, Israel, Ba'alav, B'zman, Karim, V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Mevorach, V'yam, U'mei, Yibarach, V'yishabach, V'yipar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmei V'kashah, V'yikuv, Elam Mikol, Birchata, B'shirata, Tushbechata, B'nechamata, Damiram, Yomah, V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, V'yitadar,
Amen. Say shalom b'ramav, Uya say shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru.
Amen.
Amen. Who were Marvin and Martha Greene? Because of time restraints, I'm not able to tell the entire story I prepared for today about who our parents were. This makes me sad because I felt this was the perfect time to share with you who the Greene and Gladman families were, so you knew the context of our family legacy. For I believe knowing where you came from gives insight into where you are going. And because I was in the hospital and could not attend our parents' funeral, of which I was told over 700 people attended, this day has immense meaning for me. And it's been many years since I've been to the cemetery, so seeing that in the ground is profound. I want you just to know that the Greenes and the Gladmans were my mom's side of the family, were one big group of tightly knit people, enmeshed in a loving and caring way, and setting the tone with examples that family come first. The Greene brothers opened Greene's Menswear in 1946 with no money. Their wives worked alongside of them, and together they were very successful. The elders were role models for the ultimate of giving and sharing, and that family was all about the collective well-being, concern and love for one another. Growing up, that was demonstrated over and over again as we experienced so many wonderful times with lots of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Added to our family were the friends Mom and Dad had during their high school years, as Maury Bihar was mentioned in the Clarion article. Most of these people moved to the Boyle Heights area where they remained friends, and then as GI housing became available, they migrated further east a few miles to the Monterey Park, Montebello area. These friends became family, and most importantly, especially for me and Neal, we went all through school with the children of our parents' friends. We all belonged to Temple B'nai Emet. We all attended everyone's bar mitzvahs. There were no bat mitzvahs back in those days. We all belonged to the youth group BBG and AZA, and most of these kids were our very closest friends, as some still remain in our lives today. So another form of family was our Montebello community, as we were first and second generation of closeness that added more people to our everyday family. Mom and Dad were the first of their friends to die, so you can imagine the grief they all shared. And because we lived across the street from the rabbi and his family, they were also an integral part of our family. We walked in and out of each other's houses. The rabbi would sneak over on Shabbat to swim in our pool, even though he preached, you don't do anything on Shabbos. And he was always dressed to the nines, as Dad would bring him home beautiful clothes from the store. Besides our Jewish education at Temple B'nai Emet, for me, Rabbi Gottesman was the inspiration for my studying Judaism, as he was one of the best teachers I've ever had in a classroom setting, and the person who appeared in front of me at several of the most needed times. He was the first person I saw in the emergency room at the night of the accident. When you add the Greene and Gladman family, the high school friends, the temple, the rabbi and his friends, and his family, the Montebello community was responsible for raising the money for these plaques as an everlasting tribute, as they were all a strong foundation of who our parents were. Our parents were all about those they loved, giving and being where they needed. Who were Marvin and Martha Greene as a couple? They were 12-year-olds who met in junior high school and never dated anybody else. In fact, in the days of old Hollywood, their friends would call them by the studio name MGM. Martha got Marvin, or Marvin got Martha, depending upon who was saying it, his friends or her friends. After high school graduation in 1942, like so many other young men, Dad was off to training, prepping for an overseas tour with the Army. He had a short stay at the old Fort Ord Training Center in Monterey, and then was sent to Denton, Texas for more training. On July 25th, 1943, Mom, Bubby, Aunt Annie, who was one of Pa's sisters, went to Fort Worth, Texas for a simple wedding ceremony. 79 years almost to the day that we are all standing here. And as Fred mentioned, yesterday was Dad's 98th birthday. Mom lived in Denton on the Army base with him in the married quarters until he was shipped overseas, and while she was there, she worked as a soda jerk in a local drugstore. A soda jerk is someone who makes hot fudge sundaes, sodas, malts. When Dad shipped out, Mom came home to Bubby and Pa and worked in the downtown LA May Company department store in the men's department, foreshadowing the future in the men's department. Mom was the first to bring a tri-tip roast and her famous whipped potatoes to someone who was sick. My favorite giving story about Mom is when our Auntie Maxine and Uncle Chicky had their first big business party to attend. Mom was helping Maxine pick out a dress. A few weeks before had been Mother's Day. Dad gave Mom a beautiful cashmere cardigan sweater with a fox collar. Totally the latest in fashion back then. and I still have it. Mom suggested Maxine wear the sweater for the evening, but Maxine refused, saying, "You haven't even worn it yet." They argued, and Mom relented to Maxine's reasoning. But our mom went out and bought Maxine the exact same sweater. I watched as Maxine cried with appreciation. And Dad was known to help many family members and friends if they were ever needing a job by employing them at the store, whether his brothers agreed or not. Dad was there to help. To define them as a couple, they were all about their children, home, and family first. They loved the Dodgers, they loved to bowl, they were avid card players, enjoyed fancy dinners out, loved Las Vegas, the entertainment, the glitzy shows, and especially the gambling. We were one of the only families to have a swimming pool, so big gatherings and barbecues in our yard were ongoing. Taking long road trips was a summer given. Both loved music, she show tunes and he classical music, and both appreciated everything aesthetically beautiful, she clothes and furniture, and he swooned over rivers, lakes, mountains, and beautiful scenery. Who were Marvin and Martha Greene individually? So to best describe them separately, I will share something very much Martha and very much Marvy. Mom had a definite weekly routine and was an orderly and clean housekeeper. Monday, the cleaning lady came to the house. Wednesday morning, she bowled. Thursday, she played cards and went to do her grocery shopping because she always told me the freshest foods came into the markets on Thursdays. Friday, she straightened up the house for the weekend. Saturday morning, she would get her nails done. And Saturday nights, Mom and Dad always had a dress-up date night. Of course, date night wasn't popular lingo back then. But for me, Neal, and Fred, what did it mean? A babysitter and TV dinners. Knowing all this about her, imagine my shock when I came home one day. I was about 15-ish, to something out of order. I always knew where my mother would be at 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday after school. She would be sitting at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee, smoking a cigarette, and doing the Sunday LA Times crossword puzzle. Always. It was a great sense of stability and security for me to know exactly where my mother would be when I walked into our loving home after school. So this one day I walk in the house where she's supposed to be, doing what she always does. I kiss her on the cheek. I put my school books down, no backpacks back then. I proceed with my routine and walk to the little bathroom off the kitchen to wash my hands. And to my horror, my shock, and great surprise, I see a dirty sink with toothpaste and hair stuck on the sides. Toothbrushes and the toothpaste tube, hairbrushes and combs scattered about. The mirror spotty with water stains and the hand towel thrown on the back of the toilet. What the? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A bathroom that hasn't been cleaned since me, Neal, and Fred went to school? Never have I seen such a mess at 3:30 p.m. This was an incredulous sight. I walk into the kitchen, straight up to her. My hands like this. I had a quizzical look on my face and said to her, "What have you been doing all day? The bathroom's a mess." My 4'11" mother stands up as tall as she can, trying to be nose to nose with 5'2" me, and wallops me across the face. I was in stark shock as my hand cradled my cheek with disbelief that she slapped me. We stared at each other for what seemed like a century, and then we both burst out laughing. She comes up, stands up with her finger like this, as tall as she can get, and she says, "Don't you ever question me about what I do ever again. Those were her simple words. And to me, those were her simple words to me, as the incident was never again mentioned. It took many years to realize the takeaway about that scene, but I understood it was my mother's way of putting her voice out in the universe and standing up for what she does as a mother, a homemaker, and provider of all of our needs. It was telling me to respect her job as keeper of the house, to respect her for all she does, for keeping our lives orderly. Respect that she has good days and bad days. Respect that her demeanor may not always be happy-go-lucky as she normally was. In other words, don't take her for granted. How to care for those you love. That was the legacy Martha Greene left for me. It was all about love. My mother taught me how to love. It was all about R-E-S-P, come on Aretha people, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. My mother taught me respect and how to love. Marvin Greene was a talented man. He was an artist, a musician, and he had a way with words. Many of us have at least one of his drawings in our homes from the 1940s, some of which are scenes from his time in Germany and France. He was the designer for all the stores. In fact, in the 1950s, he won an award from the Reseda Chamber of Commerce for designing a very unique storefront with the front windows jutting out in squares and not flush up to the building. He hand-built so many creative items in our home, like built-in bookcase. He made an outdoor coffee table from an old gate. He built the cabanas on our patio next to our pool. He crawled into the attic and placed speakers in various rooms on the patio, so his enormous stereo system blasted the neighborhood with music and with Dodger games. He was first chair clarinet in high school. In fact, we still have his original clarinet that Jacob played when he was in school. Dad loved classical music, as opposed to Mom, who knew every Broadway show tune by heart and was never embarrassed to sing or dance them for you. He had the first set of earphones I ever saw that were all hooked up to all the speakers in the attic. It was not unusual for him to be lying on the den couch with his earphones on, so no one else heard the loud music because he said music was best when it was loud. And he would wildly be waving his arms.
You're surprised.
And he would wildly be waving his arms in the air like he was conducting Bolero, 101 strings, or his beloved Rhapsody in Blue and Porgy and Bess. George Gershwin, Daddy's hero. I was taught that Rhapsody in Blue and George Gershwin were the highest bar of music, any music. Every composed piece of music was measured against Rhapsody in Blue. Every composer was measured against George Gershwin. So imagine my feeling for my mom and dad when Randy chose musical theater as his profession. When Randy went to work for Feinstein's, and the first time I walked into the club and saw the many pictures of George and Ira Gershwin with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers from the 1930s and 40s. I cried. I even called Neal, and he asked me why I was crying. I cried with tears of joy because I knew, my parents knew, and they were proud that what they had taught us was a legacy handed down. So about legacy. Dad left a tangible legacy. One moment, my prop manager. A tangible legacy, and was probably the greatest insight, you can pass it around if you want, greatest insight as to the man he was. This is his diary he carried with him all through World War II. riding in foxholes, or whenever he had a chance while bombs were bursting in air. I had always seen this diary in his nightstand, but never asked him what it was. Once he took it out and showed it to me and casually mentioned that he kept a diary during the war. He quickly put it away, so I felt the door wasn't open to ask any questions. I have always regretted not knowing more about my dad and his childhood. Like, what were his memories of losing his parents by the time he was 12 years old and being raised by his brother and sister-in-law? I do remember him once saying that he always wanted to go to college, and that was his biggest regret in life. I always felt my dad was the smartest man I ever knew. He was knowledgeable about so many worldly things, big and small. His written words are one of my most favorite legacies, and that's why I probably do so much writing, because he taught me that words live on. Words have power to reach others. I need to share with you 2 poems that describe Marvin Greene from 1943 to 1945. Look, God, I have never spoken to you, but now I want to say, how do you do? You see, God, they told me you didn't exist, and like a fool, I believed all this. Last night, from a shell hole, I saw your sky. I figured right then, they told me a lie. Had I taken time to see the things you made, I'd know they weren't calling a spade a spade. I wonder, God, if you'd shake my hand. Somehow I feel that you will understand. Funny, I had to come to this hellish place because I have the time, before the time, to see your face. Well, I guess there isn't much more to say, but I'm sure glad, God, that we met today. Sweet lamentation. Oh, lovely one, I dream of you. There is no other that will do. No one can ever take your place. The image of your silhouette, the way you looked last we met. I must admit, when feeling low, I glance at others, but I know that there could never, never be a substitute. No, not for me. What heavenly thoughts you bring to mind, O tender one, for you I pine. It seems for you my heart will break, although you were just a T-bone steak. Sense of humor in the middle of war. Our mother and father, Marvin and Martha Greene, started their life together at a very young age and ended their life together at a very young age. But they were together, the only way I could ever imagine them to be, never one without the other. They were very much in love. They are that great MGM love story. I want to say how difficult my journey has been as a survivor of a tragic event, especially because the boys we took to the bus depot that night were friends of mine from San Diego. If I hadn't known them, we wouldn't have been in downtown LA that late at night to encounter the car crash. While lying in the street waiting for the ambulance to come, I knew what had happened because I heard neither my mother nor my father's voice screaming if I was okay. I instantly knew I had to go home, take care of Bubby, Neal, and Fred. And when the question in my mind came up about why I lived and they didn't, because they would have been much more valuable to those left behind, the same answer came up. I had to go home to take care of Bubby, Neal, and Fred. As I get older and legacy became more important to me, I realized my purpose on this earth and what my legacy was. I will leave the world a better place because of my children and their children. They are my most beautiful and treasured legacy. If I do nothing else, I did that. And how could I end without expressing the gratitude and love to the person who shaped how me, Neal, and Fred lived our lives after November 4th, 1962. Excuse me, a bug is biting me. Bubby was the glue that held us together. She put her unbelievable grief and sorrow aside each and every day to make our lives as normal as possible. She even cooked bacon for us. Once a week, she'd wake up at 5 a.m. to take out the garbage cans at the front of the house. Because Nikola had to have his sleep, and he couldn't play basketball, and he couldn't dive off diving boards if he had to wake up early. She begged me to teach her to drive so I wouldn't have to schlep her just everywhere. And when I finally consented to a few starter in the driveway driving lessons, she hit the accelerator instead of the brake and ran over Fred's bike. But nothing defines Bubby and her infinite love for us more than when she went to court with Fred after he got a ticket and kept telling the judge,
"He's a good boy. He takes me to the doctor. He takes me to the... My husband's not well. He has to drive me. Please, he's such a good boy."
and his parents
were killed in a car accident.
I knew you would chime in. So I will say, in her words, when referring to grief, you mourn, you cry, you begin to eat again, and then you start to laugh. And as I look out at all of you, I know that's what we've done. And she knows, and Mommy and Daddy know. I have one last indulgence. Rabbi Gottesman once told me about the sermon he gave at the funeral. He continued to use the Hebrew word haneni, haneni, saying it twice each time, once for Mom and once for Dad. Its meaning is, here I am, here I am. He explained it was important for him to let the universe know that his beloved friends had been on this earth and would always remain in spirit, love, and in their children. How fitting that these memorial plaques will rest outside of this beautiful setting with a sky of sunshine and brightness, trees that sway in the winds with their soothing notes, and gentle rain that will fall to help grow the greenery and the children, while birds sing their melodies, flowers bloom their palettes of colors, and while Jewish youth learn and play together. Dad would have loved it all. I would like this nature in God's universe to know that Marvin and Martha Greene's memory live on among all these sights and sounds here at Camp Newman. So please, with me, please repeat their names loud and clear with the word Haneni after each name, so that their legacy lives on forever in all that surrounds us today. Marvin Greene, Haneni. Martha Greene, Haneni. Together, let's say amen. Amen.
Never mind. To my sister Sandy, who has been blessed and cursed with the human experience of survival. From the moment our family was tragically torn apart, consciously or unconsciously, she dedicated her life to keeping the family together. Her uncanny memory and ability to tell stories about the most obscure family members and events is amazing. The stories, relatives, connections, relationships, quotable statements are all so clear to her, and she shares them at every opportunity. Her recall of the past is the bridge and bond that has brought us to this very moment. To my brother Fred, who has inherited the passion and creative talent from a father he hardly knew. Fred has used his creative ability, evolving technology, and the human need to remember to fulfill the landscape that paints the completed picture we call life. Fred has taken themes, events, pictures, and places to stimulate memories in those of us that have some recollection of people and events, and he creates memories for those that may be unfamiliar or just too young to know. Fred creates memories through his ability to tell stories and then preserve them so the completed picture continues to evolve as generations pass. Fred's dedication to his craft, plus the dedication, vision, and support of Camp Newman, is also the bridge and bond that has brought us to this very moment. For the sake of the children, the parents are honored. And as importantly, for the pride of the parents, the children are honored.
Amen.
To my sister, Sandy, and my brother, Fred, they honor you.
And you. And you.
We're going to conclude with a Shehecheyanu. But before we do, I'd like to open it up. If anybody has anything they'd like to add, whether your own personal thoughts, memories, whatever you'd like.
Never let me touch that.
It's a sign.
Ari told me to.
So sorry.
Do I do it again?
No.
So, if anybody has anything they would like to add, please, you're more than welcome to now. We'd love to hear it.
I'll just say that there's always been a little bit of separation of understanding the legacy of Marvin and Martha, and this was an incredible opportunity to have that removed. I feel far more connected to those, especially with all of us here, which is never, to talk just about this. And so thank you, and thank you, and thank you, Belinda. And it was an incredible bridge of a moment. Thank you.
That's the idea. Thank you.
I'd echo that and just say this was so. Thank you guys for sharing this. It's pretty great.
I guess there's two things on my mind. One was how lucky that there are 3 kids in that family, because Sandy spoke so beautifully about the generation past and gave us all insight into who they were and how they were in the community. And Neal, you spoke so beautifully about your siblings and what they've given to this family in this current generation. And Dad, as the youngest, you spoke about the legacy and the Lador Vador, the passing to the future of the next generation. And I just thought that was so fitting, and I'm sure you guys just kind of did that naturally. And I look around this circle, and it's just incredible to see 100%. Every single cousin is here. Every single partner is here. Every single next generation is here. Like, we're all here. Except for Axel and Lisette. Because they're really teeny, but like the communicative generation is here. Sorry, I was thinking about them. And it's just so special to share this moment with all of you guys, with the entire family. I feel so much more connected as a family because of this moment. And I also think it's so beautiful that we have this living tribute to Marvin and Martha, to my grandparents here at Camp Newman up in the Bay Area, and that there's a tribute to them in Southern California where so many of us live, and that both of these tributes exist. in both sides of the state. It just is really meaningful.
So is this your way of saying we're all invited to the wedding?
No.
Sure.
No, but I will say that.
What are they going to do?
It was.
Turn you away?
It was not even a question to take the last name Greene. I wanted that from the beginning, and it'll be an honor to continue the name and carry it on. With an E at the end.
That's it. That's a wrap.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ari. Seriously, we cannot thank Ari and Ariel Furland, who's the development director of camp, for really just spearheading this vision through to fruition in the middle of one of the most challenging summers ever, with COVID and construction and so much else. This is so meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.